Imagine you are about to ask the girl you want to marry. You dress up, you wear your best clothes, you put on your gloves, you practice what you are going to say, and finally reach your home. And you think this is it. Today I am going to propose. Sounds romantic, right? Well, not in this story. Because before the proposal can even happen, the future bride and groom start fighting. First, they fight over a piece of land. Then, they fight over whose dog is better. Then, they insult each other's families. And somehow, after all of this, they still get engaged. Sounds completely crazy? That is exactly what makes the proposal such a hilarious chapter. This is one act comedy written by the famous Russian playwright Anton Chekhov. And underneath all the comedy, Chekhov is actually making fun of something very serious. The way people sometimes treat marriage like a business deal. So today we are going to understand the complete story in the simplest possible way. We'll meet Lomov, Natalia, and Chubukov, understand why they kept fighting, discover the real meaning behind the comedy, and finally revise the most important exam points. And trust me, by the end, you will wonder how a marriage proposal becomes a battlefield. Let's begin. Before we enter the story, let's understand the basic idea. The proposal was originally titled A Marriage Proposal. It is a one act farce written by Anton Chekhov. Now, what does farce mean? A farce is a comedy that uses exaggerated situations, ridiculous behavior, and misunderstandings to make the audience laugh, and this play is a perfect example. The story revolves around three characters. First, we have Ivan Lomov. He is a wealthy landowner and a neighbor of the Chubukov family. Lomov is about 35 years old. He is nervous, excitable, and constantly worried about his health. Then we have Natalia Stepanovna. She is Chibukov's 25-year-old daughter. Natalia is strong-minded, argumentative, and extremely stubborn. And finally, Stepan Chibukov, he is Natalia's father and another wealth landowner. Now, here is the interesting part. Lomov has come to Chibukov's house for one reason. He wants to ask for Natalia's hand in marriage. So technically, this should be a romantic story. But Chekhov has something completely different in mind. Because these three people are so that even the simplest conversation turns into an argument. The play begins inside Chibukov's drawing room. Lomov enters wearing a dress jacket and white gloves. Immediately, this tells us something. He has dressed formally because he is going to make an important proposal. Chubukov welcomes him warmly. He is surprised to see Lomov dressed so formal. He asks him why he is wearing evening clothes. Lomov becomes extremely nervous. He says that he has come to ask Chubukov for a favor, but he cannot say it directly. He keeps going around the subject. He becomes so nervous that he even asks for water. Now, Chubukov gets suspicious. He thinks perhaps Lomov has come to borrow money, but finally, Lomov gathers enough courage and he says the reason for his visit. He has come to ask for Natalia's hand in marriage, and Chubukov is absolutely delighted. He hugs Lomov, he kisses him, he says that he has been hoping for this for a long time. He is thrilled. In fact, everything seems to be going perfectly. Lomov asks whether he can expect Natalia's consent. Chubukov confidently says yes. He believes Natalia will certainly agree. Then he goes to call his daughter. And now we expect the actual proposal. But before Natalia even arrives, Lomov gives us an insight into his personality. He is extremely nervous. He thinks marriage is necessary, But he is already 35 years old. He also complains about his health. He suffers from palpitations, his lips tremble, his eyebrow twitches, he even has trouble sleeping. So, Lomo is not exactly the picture of confidence. He basically thinks, I need to get married before I become even more stressed. And then Natalia enters wearing an apron because she has been shelling peas. She welcomes Lomo and starts making ordinary conversation. She talks about the weather, she talks about hay, she talks about the work being done on the farm. Lomo tries desperately to bring the conversation towards marriage. He says that their families have always had friendly relation. He talks about their neighboring lands. He mentions that his land touches the Chukubu's property, and then he makes a terrible mistake. He mentions the oxen meadows. Lomo says that the oxen meadows belong to him. Natalia immediately disagrees. She says, no, they belong to us. And suddenly the marriage proposal disappears completely. Lomo tries to explain that the land legally belongs to him. Natalia refuses to listen. She says her family has owned the land for generations. Lomo says his documents prove otherwise. Natalia says the land is theirs. Lomo says it's his. Natalia says it's theirs. Lomo says it's his. And then the argument gets louder and louder. Think about how funny this situation is. A man has entered the house to ask for the daughter's hand in marriage. But instead of saying, I love you, he is basically saying, your family stole my land. And Natalia is equally determined. She says the meadows aren't even worth much to her, but she cannot tolerate what she considers unfairness. The argument becomes so serious that Natalia called her father. Chubuku enters. Natalia asks him who owns the oxen meadows. Chubuku immediately supports his daughter. He says the meadows belong to them. Now there are three people arguing. Lomo tries to explain the history of the land. He mentions his aunt's grandmother, Natalia's father, their ancestors, the previous arrangement involving the land, but nobody is actually listening anymore. Everyone simply wants to prove that they are right. Chubku even threatens to give the land to the peasants rather than give it to Lomo. Lomo becomes furious. He calls Chubku a land grabber. Chubku becomes even angry. Then the argument becomes personal. They begin insulting each other's families. Chubuku attacks Lomo's family. Lomo attacks Chubuku's family. Natalia joins in, and the whole conversation turns into a complete disaster. Finally, Lomo feels so physically unwell that he leaves the house. And remember, he came there to propose marriage. Instead, he has argued about land, insulted the family, and nearly collapsed. But the funniest part is still coming because Chupku suddenly remembers something. He tells Natalia, he came here to propose to you. And Natalia is shocked. She asks, to propose to me? Suddenly, her entire attitude changes. A moment ago, Natalia was calling Lomo a terrible person. She thought he was dishonest. She was furious with him. But the moment she discovers that he had come to propose, she panics. She says, bring him back. Chubuko is confused. He asks why. Natalia insists that Lomo must be brought back immediately. She even becomes hysterical. Chubuko ran after Lomo and eventually Lomo returns. He is exhausted. His heart is palpitating. His foot has gone numb. He feels terrible. But Natalia suddenly asks sorry. She says that the oxen meadows actually belong to Lomo. Just like that, the argument is over. and now we expect the proposal. Surely this time it will happen, right? Wrong. Because Chico has another argument waiting for us. This time it's about dogs. Lomo casually mentions his dog. His dog name is Guess. He says that Guess is an excellent hunting dog. Natalia immediately says that her father's dog Squeezer is better. And there is again another argument begins. Lomo says Guess is the first rate dog. Natalia disagrees. She says Squeezer is much better. Lomo points out the squeezer is overshot. That means the dog's lower jaw is shorter than the upper jaw. According to Lomo, this makes Squeezer a poor hunting dog. Natalia refuses to accept this. She praises Squeezer's pedigree. Lomo praises Guess. Natalia insults Guess. Lomo insults Squeezer. And once again, the marriage proposal disappears completely. They are not discussing love. They are not discussing marriage. They are not discussing their future. They are discussing dogs. And the argument becomes even more ridiculous. Natalia says Squeezer is 100 times better. Lomo says Guess is better. Natalia says Guess is particularly worthless. Lomo becomes furious. Chibuku enters and gets involved too. Instead of calming them down, he joins the argument. Now, the situation becomes completely chaotic. Lomo's health starts getting worse. His heart is palpitating. He feels dizzy. He felt become numb. He thinks he is dying. But Natalia and Chibuku continue arguing with him. They insult him. They call him names. Lomo also insults them. At one point, Lomo becomes so overwhelmed that he collapses into a chair. Natalia looks at him and thinks he is dead. She becomes hysterical. Chibuku also panics. He calls for water. He thinks everything has gone terribly wrong. And then Lomo starts moving again. He is alive. And Chibuku immediately sees an opportunity. He doesn't want any more arguments. So he decides to finish the matter once and for all. He puts Lomo's hand into Natalia's and says essentially she agrees to marry him. Lomo is confused. He doesn't even understand what is happening. But then he realizes he is engaged. After all the fighting, the proposal has finally happened. Lomo and Natalia finally agree to marry. Chibuku gives them his blessings. He tells them to kiss each other. They do everything. Should now be peaceful, right? Not quite. Natalia suddenly brings up the dogs again. She says Squeezer is better than Guess. Lomo immediately disagrees. He says Guess is better. Natalia say Squeezer is better. Lomo say Guess is better. And the argument begins again. Chibuku is completely exhausted. He simply asks for, and that's how the play ends. A marriage has been arranged, but the couple is already fighting, and that is the comedy of the proposal. Now let's move beyond the story. Why did Chekhov write such a ridiculous play? Because beneath all the humor, there is a serious message. The play makes fun of people who treat marriage as a particular or economic argument rather than an emotional relationship. Lomo wants to marry Natalia partly because she is a suitable match. She is a good housekeeper, she is educated, she is from a wealthy family, and their families own neighboring properties. Chibuku also sees the marriage as a sensible arrangement between two wealthy families. So, love is not really the central issue. Instead, property, money, status, and social position becomes extremely important. And this is why the play is so ironic. The three characters are so obsessed with proving that they are right that they almost destroy the very marriage they are trying to arrange. Now, let's quickly cover the most important exam points. Character of Lomov. Lomov is wealthy but extremely nervous and excitable. He constantly worries about his health. He is argumentative and easily loses his temper. Yet he wants to get married because he believes he needs a stable life. Character of Natalia. Natalia is a strong-willed, stubborn and argumentative. She is deeply concerned about property and social status. She wants to marry Lomo, but her aggressive nature repeatedly creates problems. Character of Chubuku. Chubuku is Natalia's father. He is also wealthy, emotional. Although he wants the marriage to happen, he becomes involved in almost every argument. The major themes of the play are marriage as a social and economic arrangement, greed and possessiveness over property, pride and stubbornness, human tendency to argue over simple matters, and most importantly, comedy arising from human foolishness. The moral is simple. Sometimes people become so obsessed with proving themselves right that they forgot what is actually important. Lomo, Natalia, and Chubuko are so stubborn that they can turn even a marriage proposal into a battlefield, and that is what makes the play both funny and meaningful. Okay, one final revision. Lomo visits Chibuku's house to propose. She asks her father to bring him back. Lomo returns. Then they start arguing about their dogs, Guess and Squeezer. Lomo nearly collapses. Chibuku finally gets them engaged, and even after the engagement, they continue arguing about the dogs. That is the proposal by Anton Chekhov. And with that, we have reached the end of the 5-minute revision Class 10th English First Flight playlist. From the first chapter to the proposal, we have covered the stories, characters, themes, important questions, and exam points together. If these videos helped you understand your class 10th English chapters without having to memorize everything blindly, please like this video and subscribe to the 5-minute revision. And now I want you to decide what we study next. Please comment below which textbook should the 5-minute revision cover next. Tell me the textbook name and class you want. Maybe it's another NCERT English book, maybe it's a science, maybe social science, or another textbook completely. Your comments will help decide our next playlist. And if you have been watching this entire First Flight series, thank you. All the best for your CBSE board exams. Keep revising, keep learning, and remember, you don't need to study harder when you can revise smarter. This is the 5-minute revision. See you all in the next playlist.